Knight's evolution hero Successor opens in long ago. The world was overrun by the forces of darkness which almost took over all of humanity. However, 7 knights, also known as the 7 heroes, stood up to fight against the terrible king that plagued the human world back then and overcame the darkness. A few hundred years later, the same darkness began to corrupt the human realm yet again. But this time, the heroes' power was passed on to successors to fight the upcoming darkness of the cult, Physis, and protect the world against them. Amid the fight, a young man named Nemo is saved by the hero and leader of the current 7 knights, Furia. Furia, upon saving this mysterious guy, took him in and helped him manifest his heroic powers over the following weeks. The only thing they can't understand is that Nemo's hero is a stranger, and is unlike the other heroes they've ever seen. So they keep him under close watch and make sure not to let things spiral out of control, as Nemo becomes the man they'll all love and cherish. If you liked the recap or are new to the channel, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to get early access to our new content as soon as it drops. Enjoy the recap. The first scene of the series shows a random village after it was decimated by an army of Physis, echo the dark, dirty, and horrifying monsters with wings and wriggly flesh. The hero that's supposed to save the village, Furia, arrived there a little bit too late as she couldn't find any survivors from the attack. Devastated, she closes her eyes and sings a song to pay her respects to the people of that village who lost their lives that day. Her song resonates all over the ruined village with statues, half-demolished buildings, and other inanimate objects rejoicing in her soft voice. After singing for a short while, her assistant Ellen ran towards her to report her findings to her. Apparently there was no successor and the entire village was extinct. Furia sucks up her fuck, finishes the funeral song, and leaves the village to be lost to history forever. In the next scene, Uli village gets attacked by the same army of Physis that laid siege to the first village. After watching his entire village get destroyed by the Physis monsters, Nemo, who was the only survivor, faces the monsters all by himself and readies himself to either kill them or die trying. At that moment, Furia's train was traveling along the meadows shadowing the Uli village. Ellen could see the fire from the train, and she informs her master about it. Instead of falling into despair, Furia changes the course of her train and heads straight for Uli village. Meanwhile, Nemo keeps struggling to find a safe space to hide himself, at least until some form of help arrives. He witnesses the monsters eat a woman's head alive and turn her into a Physis monster before racing towards the train station to hide there. On getting to the half-demolished train station, he finds a briefcase and opens it hoping to find something that might help him there. Sadly, he didn't find anything at all. Soon after, one of the Physis monsters attacks the man and calls his friends to come check out their new meal. Nemo gives up on any hope of living and surrenders himself to his enemies. Just then, Furia's train approaches the village and Furia is seen on her short skirt casing out the joint. When she gets all the information she needs, she grabs her lance and unleashes her lightning attack on the monsters threatening to kill the lone survivor of the village. Nemo watches the hero from Grand Seed Academy summon her heroic spirit, Eunomia, to help aid her in taking down all the big bad monsters as she takes on another different form. Furia ends up destroying all the monsters threatening Nemo and gets enough time to introduce herself to him. Apparently, Nemo is a new student at the Hero Academy called the Grand Seed Academy. After exchanging names, Furia thanks her heroes for helping her save at least one person that day. Up next, she takes Nemo with her to her train and then sets her rails for the academy. Hours later on the train, Furia serves Nemo some black coffee, and Nemo tastes coffee for the first time. As any soy boy would behave, he didn't like the taste of authentic black coffee, so Furia helped him add some sugar. Moving on, Nemo asks her to tell him why she saved him back then. Furia thinks for a while and tells him she did that because she felt the need to protect someone from those terrible monsters, and made sure she did when she found him. Nemo comments about how bad those ugly things left his village, but then Furia tells him about her hero, Eunomia, who fought alongside her colleagues to vanquish the god of darkness. Long ago, their world was driven to the brink of ruin by the evil god Nestra. However, the 7 knights stood up to him and took him down, hence restoring world peace. Before they left the world, they all came together to create the Grand Seed Academy, a school that protects the world and is funded by donations from all over the world. Furia explains that heroes are bred in that school, and amongst the heroes, 7 knights are picked every generation to inherit the powers of the dead heroes so their legacy can continue living. As they have their little discussion, another Physis monster is formed in the Uli village. In the meantime, Faria congratulates Nemo on becoming the most recent student in the school. Moments later, the physis monster that was formed earlier rushes towards the train and derails it. Faria makes sure to protect Nemo, however she gets heavily injured by doing that. When the physis monsters show up again, Faria takes the initiative to attack the monster and slash it into pieces. However, a strange occurrence happens, and the monster regenerates its torn body parts and attacks Nemo. Faria gets very scared of what might happen to the student, so she keeps on fighting the monster all over till it gets a little weakened. She checks up on Nemo and finds him panting and weak. Then she encloses them in a dome of light and buys Nemo some time to pick up Ellen and escape now that he still has a chance. Thankfully, our boy Nemo wasn't a coward, so he wasn't ready to take the easy route out. Just then, by sheer luck, Nemo gets gifted a purple grimoire which he opens to check the contents. A white bright light encloses Nemo and transports him to another dimension. There he meets the Queen of Fate, who calls herself the Guardian of the Garden. She asks Nemo to tell her what he wants in life, and Nemo tells her that he wants to be stronger to protect Faria. When he's asked what he's willing to give in return, Nemo offers his life in exchange for power, and the Guardian acknowledges his sacrifice. With this, she sends him a hero's spirit and instructs it to guide Nemo in his fight against the monster. Nemo gets back to the battlefield in time to protect Faria from a flying train car. Then he allows his hero to take over his body while Faria watches him shine. Nemo executes his plan with acute skills and precise movements, and manages to use Faria's lance and his chain knife to stop the monster. Then he works together with Faria, who tells him to synchronize with his hero to finish the monster. Before their final showdown, Nemo becomes one with his hero and wields his weapon with his heart's desire. When he's ready, he coordinates his attacks with Faria and finishes the monster before the sun rises. After taking down the monster, Faria thanks Nemo for saving her and gives him an official welcome to the Grand Seed Academy. After traveling for 6 long hours, Nemo finally arrives in the infamous Grand Seed Academy, where his life as a member of the 7 Knights begins. On his first day at school, Nemo gets to walk with the beautiful and popular Faria, who is psyched to finally have a new member on their team. While Ellen walks off to sign off some punishment paperwork for destroying the train, Faria gives Nemo a lesson on taking responsibility and valuing human life over any other thing. At that instant, the musclehead of the 7 Knights group, Joe, rushes into the school premises hauling a cart with a frozen physis dragon from the Midland area. Nemo asks Joe about his powers, and Faria tells him Joe is the successor to the hero, Spike, and his superpower is ice-themed. Joe boasts about being the strongest of the 7 Knights, but then Nemo asks him a few weird questions about the monster he's taking with him. Joe tells him not to feel sorry for such monsters, since they've spent so much of their time killing and turning thousands of people into one of their kind. With that, he races to the Research Institute and leaves Nemo with his tour guide, Faria. Nemo is a little marveled over how powerful such a knight can be to haul a huge dragon like that. Anyways, Faria takes Nemo to the office of the 7 heroes. Before their arrival, 4 of the heroes, Gareth, the creep with elf ears, Shirley the uptight sassy lady, Joe the musclehead, and Gildan the cute guy with dog ears, all arrive there to witness the emergency meeting called by their leader, Faria, who also turns out to be the president of the Student Union Council. They mouth off a few derogatory words at their president for asking them to come over for a meeting she was late to. Moments later, Faria shows up with Nemo and her assistant Ellen. She takes over the discussion and introduces Nemo to the entire group, making sure to let them know that he's a new student and also the latest member of the 7 Knights. All 4 of them, including Nemo himself, are a little shocked by this development. But then Faria already made her decision, and there is no going back. Shirley objects to her statement and implores Faria to rethink her decision to bring Nemo into the group without letting him pass through the appropriate channels. But again, Faria has made up her mind. Joe makes a stupid joke about building muscles and whatnot, but then Faria narrates the contract Nemo made with his hero during his first time on the battlefield, which shocks everyone. Gareth asks Nemo to tell him how he converses with his hero, but Nemo tells him he doesn't really understand his hero yet. Gareth gets super suspicious of the guy and asks him a few questions until Faria cuts in. She tells Gareth to quit asking incessant questions and also lets him know that the hero, Lady Eunomia, endorses Nemo as a bona fide hero, so she's going to trust her. With that, she concludes the meeting and asks Joe to show Nemo around. Joe grumbles a little bit, but then Faria fuels his ego with lies about his personality, just so he can take Nemo with him. While showing him around, Joe complains about being stuck with Nemo, which makes Nemo himself demean himself. Joe teaches him how to respect himself as a hero, and even shows him some of the statues made in honor of the real heroes from way back. He continues discussing with Nemo, but then ends up getting so pissed off that he picks up the poor boy and nearly punches him. Thankfully, the Academy librarian Successor showed up to stop that from happening under her watch. She introduces herself to the new guy, Nemo, and ignores the musclehead, who seems to have too much respect for her. Successor tells Nemo a little bit about the past heroes, letting him know that most of the 7 heroes found their powers in that very building. However, on rare occasions, fate guides others to become heroes by themselves. Nemo tries to wrap his head around her words, but then he keeps quiet and lets her calm Joe down so he can get along with him well. Joe gets way too excited after seeing Successor that day. Their meeting boosted his spirits, and he finished his tour with Nemo later that evening. Nemo thanks him for the help and heads over to his dorm, where he finds Faria waiting for him. That night during his workout runs, Joe's hero, Spike, appears to him, and asks to make sure Joe isn't keeping any form of malice against Nemo. Joe tells him not to worry too much about that, since he's just trying to get stronger, that's all. Meanwhile, Nemo finds out that he'll be staying in a warm building with just Faria and her assistant, nobody else. During dinner, Nemo tries to get why he's being treated differently from the others, and Faria lets him know that he's special and should feel that way. Besides, it's his first day in school, so it's normal for him to not fit in right away. Nemo gets her point and goes to sleep. The following day, Nemo endures a long history class and heads to the hallway after the class. There, he meets Gareth, the weirdo who asks him to help deliver a vial of blue potion to the Alchemy Research Institute. Nemo innocently collects the vial and takes it to the institute. What they didn't know was that the dragon that Joe kept frozen was already thawing. Upon getting to the research building, Nemo finds Joe, who talks down to him again. Suddenly there's a loud bang, and they all get out to find Joe's dragon alive and about to wreak havoc. Joe gets into action mode and summons his successor to help him freeze the damn dragon all over again. He protects Successor and her students and makes Nemo lead them somewhere safe while he takes care of the dragon. When they're out of harm's way, Joe takes the fight to the dragon and wounds its head. To his surprise, the dragon grows another head and becomes much stronger than before. He spits out blue fire from its mouth and causes Joe to use his snowfield power to wound it again. Nemo shows up moments later to help and asks Joe to tell him what to do. Joe tries to get him off his back, but Nemo isn't there to slack off at all. He quickly activates his hero ability and restrains the monster to buy Joe enough time to freeze the wound. Joe reluctantly rushes in and freezes the shitty dragon with all his power. Nemo hangs on as long as he can to make sure he helps Joe finish off the dragon for real this time. Thankfully, Joe's ice was able to expose the monster's core, which helped it regenerate its body parts. Joe destroys the core, saving the entire village, and becomes friends with Nemo. He narrates his life history with Nemo, and tells him to stick with him so they can be a formidable duo. Successor, who was watching them fight from her quarters, finally realizes just how strong Nemo is and wishes him to come to save them. Faria receives the report of the battle from Shirley that evening and discusses Nemo's power with her. Apparently, she's scared of his power and wishes to keep his powers a secret by putting him on the board and keeping a very close watch on him so that he doesn't end up going out of control. On their next meeting, Nemo and the other members of the 7 Knights discuss the recent developments concerning the Physis attack around their local. Gareth gives them a presentation to show just how vast the Physis monsters have spread so far, and tells them that they have to keep working together if they're to have any hope of defeating the increasing Physis monsters. Besides, Faria tells them they just received some funds from other countries from around the world, and can carry out their operations with ease to protect the world in return. She then dismisses them for the day and rewards them by cooking them her special croquette. While the others get scared of eating her food, Nemo finds Faria's food to be very delicious, as it's his first time having croquettes. He even goes as far as eating Joe's croquettes just to satisfy his deep hunger. Soon after, Faria brings them another batch and urges them to dig into their meals so they can enjoy the croquettes while they're still hot. After eating, Nemo heads out of the dormitory with the boys, Gareth, Joe, and Gildan, who are very shocked to see him down so many croquettes in one sitting. They tease him a little bit, and then move on to shower him with compliments and praise for helping Joe beat down the monster dragon the previous day. Joe gets overexcited as usual and says something disrespectful to Gilda, something about him fastening his belts so Nemo doesn't overtake him. Their meeting ends on a good note, and Nemo continues on his own to stare at the night sky. Sophia finds him all alone outside and stops by to say hi to him. She tells him not to feel down about his power, and instead embrace it and make everyone proud of him. Nemo thinks about her words and starts thinking of what to do next. Up next, Gildan and Joe are seen walking together when Ju stops and says his goodbyes to his friend just so he can continue his night training to keep fit. Gildan feels a little behind and thinks about doing some extra work in the woods just so he can catch up to the others. Joe realizes that his buddy is sore about what he said when he was comparing Gildan with Nemo, and he tells Gildan not to think too much about it. Gildan puts on a fake smile and fools Joe into thinking he is fine. Thankfully, the doofus takes the bait and heads back to his dorm room. Moments after, Gildan gets his mental health ready to begin his training, and he rushes to his secret spot. In the next scene, Nemo is caught in a dream and finds himself in a burning library room. He looks around to understand what is happening and finds his hero calling to him right in front of him. Nemo wakes up and finds out that he's just dreaming. However, Faria knocks on his door and hurries him to get dressed as they'd been called to action. Nemo does just that and joins them on the blimp, which takes off to their next mission. On their way there, Faria explains the nature of their mission to him, letting him know that they've been called on an Imperial Academy expedition. Nemo appears confused and asks for some explanation. Ellen explains further that a mission of such nature allows them to be hired as freelance warriors to help undermined nations take down fishes that are too strong for their military. Nemo gets the gist and prepares himself for the fight ahead. Meanwhile, the townsfolk suffer from the fishes attacks and even manage to get their greatest treasure, the silver hourglass, destroyed by the monsters. The captain of their military is very disappointed by how helpless they are against the fishes monsters. Just as they're about to lose hope, the 7 knights show up and protect everyone in the town by fighting the monsters to the best of their abilities. The captain of the town's military is a little shocked to see how powerful the 7 knights are as they decimate every fishes monster they lay their eyes on. They're not just all talk and can save the world if they put their minds to it. While the other heroes fight and take down the monsters, Gildan runs out of magic mid-fight, but then decides to go out of his way to take down one last fishes monster. Sadly, he gets caught up in the monster's clutch, but then Joe comes to help rescue him from the monster. Then he coordinates attacks with Nemo to take down the fishes monster that nearly killed him. Faria uses her lightning to strike down the rest of the monsters and ends the battle in their success. Upon returning to the academy, Gildan gets himself treated in the infirmary by the nurse there who notices him spacing out. She tries to find out what's happening to the cute dude, but then Gildan shies away to return to his training. Later that night, Gildan is seen slashing trees with his sword in his secret spot in the woods. His hero, however, could feel something very wrong with his successor, but didn't say anything. In the meantime, Joe finds Nemo on the balcony and hands him an apple to thank him for earlier. Then he moves on to talk about Gildan and the heavy amount of responsibilities the little guy often has to endure. He's the prince of a nation and has a lot of eyes watching him from everywhere, so it's normal for him to feel the need to work excessively hard. Joe was also sorry for acting like a jerk and telling Gildan that he was a burden earlier. What those two didn't know was that Gildan already surpassed his limits on magic and was slowly being possessed by an evil spirit in the woods. Nevertheless, Joe continues telling Nemo about his buddy and wishes that Gildan would get the point and not try to kill himself in every fight. Seconds later, they feel a rumble in the ground and rush down to check out what happened. Meanwhile, Faria reports on the happenings of their mission earlier and listens to her superior complain about the fishes' weird habits of destroying hourglasses wherever they attack. In the end, he instructs Faria to keep a close eye on the boy, Nemo, and make sure he doesn't lose control of his powers. Faria ends her meeting and walks out of the room with her assistant Ellen. Ellen complains about her not having the best sleep and tells her to try getting more rest while she can. Just then, Shirley shows up alarmed to inform her about the Gildan problem. Around that time, Gareth, Nemo, and Joe all gather around the monster that Gildan had become to try to save him. At first, Nemo couldn't understand how Gildan could turn bad, but then Gareth tells him that it only happens when they try to channel too much energy to activate their hero powers. Now that Gildan's out of control, they have to bring him back to order by any means necessary. Joe chooses to end his friend's life, but then Nemo speaks some sense into Joe and Gareth's head, telling them Gildan's life is just as important as theirs, and they should all work on saving him and not killing him. While all that happens, Gildan finds his consciousness in another dimension. This time, he witnesses himself being congratulated on being accepted into the academy. Gildan faces his darkness and endures being called a coward for trying to run away. Back in real life, Joe, Nemo, and Gareth all work together to freeze Gildan in place so they can yank him out of his monstrous self and save him. Gildan manages to speak up and begs everyone to end him now before he becomes a real threat to the school. However, his hero was there for him in the other dimension, giving him enough courage to fight on and get rescued. He instructs his friends to be ready to pull him out when he gives the order. Joe and the others make sure to freeze the monster all over as Nemo pulls Gildan out from his monster with all strength. When they're done, Gildan thanks Nemo for saving him when he gave up on himself. Joe also came by and apologized for being such a dick to him earlier. Gildan finally forgives his dumb buddy and returns to being friends with him. The next morning, Faria cleans Nemo, who is still asleep. Nemo wakes up shortly and makes Faria trip and fall over him on the bed. Together, the two face each other with their lips ever so close to one another. Faria gets very embarrassed to be staring at a boy in the eye just like that and nearly kisses him. However, she gets back to her senses and gets Nemo back on his feet. After freshening up, she apologizes for acting very strangely to him earlier and tells him that he's been in bed for a whole day. Even Gildan, who appeared to be much more hurt, woke up before him. Faria tells him Gildan's fine and then scolds him for putting his life on the line just to save someone who probably doesn't consider him that much. She continues to lecture on the right way to save people so that he won't have a near-death experience in every battle next time. Nemo gets fed up with her lectures and sits on his bed. Faria tucks him back in bed and promises to take care of him till he's fully recovered all the magic that he lost in the fight to save Gildan. On the other side of the building, Gildan sits in his bed, telling his people, Joe and Gareth, to stop babysitting him while Nemo gets special treatment from the president free of charge. Gareth gets serious and asks him if it's true that he can't remember what happened to him before his possession. Gildan tells him he doesn't understand what happened either, but thank goodness he's fine now, because that's all that matters. Gareth, however, wasn't done yet as he began to suspect that someone else had something to do with Gildan's possession. If anything, that person must be inside the academy for them to commit such weird crimes so easily. Gareth wasn't sure if that person was Nemo or not, but he plans on finding out. Amid their discussion, they hear the president of the student council screaming from her quarters again after burning her pot of porridge. Nemo checks on her and advises her to turn down the heat so that she can save some of the porridge for them. However, Faria wasn't able to do that on time. Instead, she switches off the fire and makes some croquettes for Nemo to eat from. She apologizes for being such a klutz. But then again, Nemo seemed pretty fine with eating croquettes day in and day out. Faria manages to put a smile on her face, and a few moments later, her cat wanders into Nemo's room from hers. Nemo notices the look on her face and asks her if the cat is hers. Faria tells him that the cat is hers and then urges him to try touching her. Nemo tries to touch the cat, but then the cat doesn't want to be touched by a savage like Nemo. Instead, it ran away like the cute kitty it is. Over the next few hours, Faria makes sure to help Nemo out with his chores, such as bathing, changing his clothes, and making sure not to scare him to death in the shower. After doing all that, Faria takes a breather on Nemo's bed and nearly falls asleep. However, her assistant, Ellen, shows up with more work for her to do and calls her attention to it. After hearing her master complain about the excessive amount of work she's been getting lately, Ellen advises Faria to hand over some of the paperwork for her to do. Sadly, Faria is a hands-on type of person and would rather prefer to do things herself to avoid errors. She leaves Nemo with Ellen and heads back to her office to complete her work. Ellen pours Nemo a cup of tea and tells him not to think too badly of the president, as it's in her nature to go out of her way to help others. As he drinks his tea, Nemo asks Ellen if she's known Faria for a long time. Ellen tells him about her origin story. Being a direct descendant of the hero Ionia, Faria has always been taught to become a knight since childhood. And that spells volumes about why she's so strong today. She needs to focus strongly on things that matter and make sure she does her job very well. Nemo gets scared of being such a bad burden to Faria, but then Ellen tells him not to think that, as Faria sees him as a very important asset in their team. When Nemo asks why, Ellen tells him it's because he's the lone survivor and the only person she could protect that day. Later on, Faria, Gildan, Joe, and Gareth all show up to discuss and check up on Nemo. Gildan teases Nemo a little bit and makes Nemo almost drop the bomb on Faria's pet. Joe runs his mouth a few more times and freezes up when Successor shows up to check on Nemo. As for Gareth, he prepares a special decoction to speed up his healing process so he can be back to normal in no time. Joe keeps saying rubbish in front of Successor till she leaves the room for them to all enjoy. After she's gone, everyone has a good time and plays cards with the prince. Nemo beats Gildan 3 times in the same card games and listens to them talk about summoning their heroes and talking to them to help them win the matchup next time. This makes Nemo sad as he still doesn't know how to summon his hero yet. He tells his people about his supposed disability and asks for their advice. While the others sympathized with him, Gareth called his case an abnormality. Joe suggests Nemo asks Successor about it so he can get the answers he needs from her. Seconds later, Shirley sees herself in and complains to them about their noise. Faria explains things to her and apologizes on everyone's behalf. Shirley accepts the apology and hands her more paperwork to fill in, reminding her to get some rest and not to forget about the grave situation they're all in. Faria receives the paperwork and thanks Shirley for the visit. Shirley leaves shortly and stops somewhere to think about what she heard when she eavesdropped on Nemo's conversation with the others, when he mentioned that he can't talk about his hero. Shirley gets a little concerned at Nemo's secrets and visits Ellen to perform some weird ritual, which she also calls her little secret. By evening time, Faria and Nemo catch her pet cat roaming free in the corridors, and Faria gets very afraid of what might happen if Shirley finds her cat roaming around the lobby, as pets aren't allowed in the lobby. Shirley and Ellen are seen climbing up the stairs when they notice something weird with Faria and Nemo. Thankfully, she didn't spot the cat hiding behind her and managed to spend the entire evening searching for their stubborn kitty. After tracking him for a while, they managed to find him at top a tower. The stupid cat still managed to get himself stuck on a platform that was already weak. Realizing that the cat's going to fall, Nemo jumps and catches it, then throws it at Faria as he falls to his death. Faria thinks fast and abandons the useless scumbag of a cat to save her dying specimen. She catches him right before he dinks down to the roof below him and tells him to hang on to her hand so he doesn't fall. Nemo, however, knows that Faria would fall with him if she kept on holding his hand for an extended period. He tells her to let go of him so that he can fall alone, but then Faria holds onto his hands and eventually falls with him. On his way down, Nemo's hero appeared to him and saved both of them from falling. Faria wakes up in Nemo's hands and finds one of them clutched up on the roof. The cat finally brings itself to Nemo and hugs him like a sensible cat would. Up next, Faria keeps watch on a sleeping Nemo as she gets really worried about Nemo. Her hero, Eunomia, appears to her and tells her not to worry too much about Nemo. She warns her about a storm that's coming and hopes she's ready to face it. The next morning, Nemo wakes up and heads straight to the library to talk to Successor about his hero. Successor, after hearing all he had to say, asks him why he's so hell-bent on finding out about his hero. Nemo tells her he finds it weird to not be able to speak to his hero yet, so he thinks that he could ask her for help. Successor takes him to a part of the library to check the ancient texts, hoping to find information about his hero. Sadly enough, they find nothing, but Successor promises to keep searching everywhere to get something about his hero very soon. Nemo thanks her for the help and rushes back outside. Shortly afterward, Mina, one of the members of the Student Council Committee, shows up to return a book she borrowed earlier from the library. She asks about the boy who just left, and Successor tells her a bit about Nemo. Later on, the president, Faria, visits the infirmary to check up on the latest vampire victims. She finds Shirley, the chairman of the disciplinary committee, and her assistant, Mina, standing in front of the infirmary bed as Ellen heals the others. Ellen finishes healing one of the wounded ones, and Faria checks out the bite marks on the victim's neck. Upon closer inspection, she finds out that the person was bitten and drained by a vampire. Shirley promises to do something about it and find the culprit as soon as possible. Mina, however, tries to stop her chairwoman from doing way too much at a time. With Nemo there, he promises to join them in their plan and help them find the vampire in question. Faria welcomes him on board and tells him to work with Shirley to get the culprit. In the next scene, Nemo meets with Mina for the first time, and Mina thanks him for volunteering to help them out with their investigation. Nemo nods in agreement and carries the books he took from the library to Shirley's office. As they sift through the text for some information, Shirley thanks him for the help and then asks him if he's hiding something. Nemo asks her why she thinks so, and Shirley tells him it's because he doesn't seem to know much about the Academy and the Seven Knights. However, she does let him off easy and makes him promise that whatever he's doing it for the greater good. After that, Nemo gets to Claire's office to check up on the records she has about vampires. Claire tells him a few things about vampires and opens an old book to check out some text about vampires there. She opens it a little and finds what she's looking for. Then she hands the book over to Nemo, telling him about the vampire's weakness, which is fire. Before Nemo leaves her office, she asks him if Gareth ever talked about her in their conversations, but then Nemo tells her no. Claire goes on a rave to talk about Gareth's coldness towards her. Nemo ignores her and checks the entrance to find Mina waiting there for him. He joins her and walks home with her that night. However, on their way home, Mina tells him about a weird rumor that's been spreading all over school. A rumor about Shirley being the vampire that's been biting those kids so far. She puts on a show of what seems to be crocodile tears and finally gets Nemo's sympathy as she wanted. Nemo offers himself to be of service to her like the fool that he is, and Mina asks him to accompany her to the outskirts of a forest just so she can investigate a particular area there. Nemo accompanies her to the outskirts of the forest and hides somewhere when they hear people talking in the distance. Nemo squints his eyes and finds Shirley sucking blood from Ellen's neck. He tries to intervene, but then his hero stops him from doing so. When she's done sucking the blood, she apologizes to Ellen, who is in love with her. But then Ellen pets her head, telling her not to worry too much about lost blood, as long as she can regenerate the cells back. At the point where Shirley was becoming comfortable with her partner, Mina intentionally stepped on a branch to alert her. Shirley hears the branch snap and jumps as fast as she can to attack the intruder. Upon realizing that she's been discovered, Shirley makes a run for it. Nemo follows her in a bid to catch up to her. Shirley, on the other hand, gets a lecture from her hero to stop running away and just face her fears so she can become the true master of the flames, her worst nightmare. Nemo catches up to her in the woods and asks her if she is the one behind the attacks on the committee members. Shirley tells him she isn't the one, but then again, she knows he won't listen to her, so she attacks him in her hero form. Nemo defends himself against her attacks and listens to her origin story. Born in a harmless vampire family, Shirley has always been forced to endure the fear and hate the humans had for her clan. Even despite her family being harmless and pure, Shirley still lost them to the humans. Ever since her huge loss, she's been going from town to town just to survive. Now that she's found in the school, she feels bad about leaving again. Nemo tries to get her to stay with them in the school, but then again, Shirley isn't so sure. Eventually, she calms down and decides to follow Nemo's advice. With that, she gets to a rooftop to talk about her next move. Just then, she finds Ellen in the hands of a Physis monster and hopes on Nemo's rope so she can get to the building where Ellen is kept. Getting there, they find Mina waiting for them to arrive. As it turns out, Mina is also a vampire and has been the culprit all along. She's been working behind the scenes to frame Shirley and make her run away from school. Apart from that, she's also a member of the Physis cult group, whose wish is to eradicate the 7 Knights so that the nations of the world would bow to them. Shirley asks her why she's still around when the cult members have already been exterminated. Mina lets her know that they haven't been eradicated yet. Instead, they've been storing power for a long time so that they can carry out their plans and create a new world with them as the sole rulers. Moving on, she tells Shirley to join her as a fellow vampire and help her bring down the humans. However, Shirley isn't a snitch or a betrayer. As such, Mina accepts her fate and decides to bring Shirley in by force. She works on knocking Nemo down so she can have her time with Shirley. However, Nemo keeps on coming back and defending against her attacks. When it comes down to it, he injured Mina's hands and watches her grow another one. This time, Shirley joins the fight and uses Mina's weakness against her. After a few more discussions, Shirley decides to use both of their weaknesses against Mina. Nemo has an epiphany from his hero and finally figures out a plan to take Mina down. He tells Shirley to hold her down while he creates his attack, and Shirley does just that. With only minutes to spare, Nemo constructs the baddest gun ever and shoots a death ray which he calls Legis Breaker at the perpetrator Mina. Mina doesn't stand a chance as the death ray kills her instantly. The following day, Shirley takes Ellen into her quarters to take care of her wounds. In the meantime, she checks up on Nemo and implores him to keep their recent revelations a secret from the others. She bites Nemo's neck, tastes the flavor of his blood, a weird one, and then leaves him to keep doing his thing. A few days later, Gareth is seen in the library investigating a certain ghost in the old ruins of the library that Mina, the idiot who turned against Shirley, was investigating before she was discovered. He meets with Sophicia to ask her a few things about the old library and the ghost living there. Sophicia tells him about Genius, the library head at the time when the old library was still standing. It's said that the old librarian Genius used to be a double agent for Physis, but Eunomia took him down and left his carcass there to rot. To this day, Genius' curse still haunts their school, and it's an even popular story nowadays. That night on his way out of the library, Gareth runs into Claire, who is rushing over to get him the text he's been searching for at her office. After giving him the books, she asks him why he's so interested in the old library, but Gareth ignores her and thanks her for the help. Claire asks Gareth to lean on her next time he needs help from her, and she'll be there to help him out. Gareth, however, ignores her and goes on his merry way. Poor Claire is left wondering what she did wrong to be so invisible in Gareth's eyes. The following day, Nemo finds the entire school to be in a happy mood. He asks Feria about it, and she tells him that it's about time for the annual traditional festival held by the school to cool off from all the fighting. As they discuss, Feria takes Nemo to the cafeteria, but somehow has issues opening the stuck door. Claire shows up and helps them out so they all get to eat at the same table. During lunch, Claire complains about her man Gareth, who doesn't have any regard for her. Claire confesses her love for Gareth, but Nemo doesn't seem to understand what she meant at the time. He asks her to explain the meaning of love to him, and Claire does a pretty practical job of explaining it. Besides, she was hoping she'd invite Gareth to come to the dance with him by nighttime, but then she realizes that he may not be into her. Nemo and Feria notice the sadness on Claire's face as she prepares to give up on the chase before even asking him out. However, Nemo makes it pretty clear to her that she shouldn't be too quick to throw in the towel. Claire gets the much-needed confidence boost to ask Gareth out on the dance, and thanks the president for the help. She then asks the president who she'll be inviting over to the dance as well, and Feria looks at Nemo, who is pretty clueless about what just happened, and tells Claire not to worry about her at all. However, Claire could sense the connection between the president and Nemo, and she advises her to be brave as well in her exploits. After his lunch, Nemo hangs out with Gildan and Joe, who are arguing over who they are going to take over to the dance. Apparently, Joe was thinking of asking Sufficia to the dance, and as for Gildan, he already had letters in his hand from girls begging him to go to the dance with them. Nemo calls Joe out on his love for Sufficia and advises him to be more honest with his feelings. However, Joe throws a fit and turns their sights to Nemo to ask him whether he'd be going to the dance with the president or not. Before our boy can reply to them, Shirley shows up and asks him out to the dance in front of Gildan and Joe. Before Nemo can give her his answer, she tells him to think about it for a while. Surprised, the two boys ask him to spill his secret, but Nemo is no snitch. Later that day, Feria hosts a student council meeting with her colleagues to talk about ideas for the festival. Joe and Gildan make a few stupid ideas about what to do, and this ends up pissing Gareth off. He gets up and walks out of the meeting as he doesn't feel like they need the festival. Shirley, on the other hand, tells him to chill out and try to have fun when he can, so he won't die of seriousness. Joe and Gildan get a little surprised to see Shirley trying to have fun. Even still, Gareth leaves the room to do more important things with his time. Not to blame him though, as he had his home destroyed by monsters back when he was younger. As the meeting continues, Gareth moves out to do his thing. Claire catches him alone and finally makes a deal with him. She helps him with a clue from the old library, and in return, Gareth has to accompany her to the dance during the students' festival. Gareth accepts her bet and lets her go like the weak dun he is. He regrets his actions later on and wishes he'd talked to her one more time. After a few days, the D-Day finally comes and everyone is in a festive mood. The members of the student council all take part in acting as maids to serve their fellow classmen. And so far, everyone seems to be doing a very good job keeping their customers satisfied. Feria and Nemo have their moment alone, and Feria finally asks Nemo out to the dance. Nemo, however, tells her he's already been asked by Shirley earlier, and this breaks Feria's heart. With that, Shirley pops up from under the table and tells Nemo to choose one of them as his partner for the dance. Thankfully, Nemo is saved by one of his colleagues who calls him to serve Sufficia some croquettes in the library. Nemo takes the food to Sufficia and asks her to explain to him the concept of love and how it works. Sufficia takes him on a few hours of therapy, letting him know that he's approaching adolescence now that he's growing up. She gives him a crash course on what she feels love should be like and lets him know that it shouldn't be forced at all. With the little information he was able to gather from Sophia, Nemo makes his decision and heads back to his colleagues to continue doing his thing. On getting to their workspace, he asks after Feria, but then Gildan and Joe tell him she's in her office. Before letting him leave, they try to get him to tell them who he'd be going to the dance with. Nemo ignores them and goes to visit Shirley first. After getting her attention alone, he tells her to ask Ellen to the dance instead of her. However, Shirley was having cold feet and didn't know how Ellen felt about her. She admits to asking him out of spite and apologizes for confusing him. Shortly afterward, someone calls her and she goes to answer them. Elsewhere, Claire makes her way to the old library desperate to find something for Gareth. She walks over a pitfall and falls into a dark tunnel. Then she walks around the place and finds a huge door in front. She uses her separation alchemy to open the door so she can gain access to the room inside. Meanwhile, Nemo catches Shirley alone again, and this time he tries to talk some sense into her head. He let her know that it was okay to be rejected as long as she tried. At least now she'll have no regrets. Shirley finally asks Ellen out. She thanks Nemo for the help and tells him to ask the president out as well so they can go together. With that, she meets up with Ellen and finally asks her out. To her surprise, Ellen agrees to go with her. That night, Nemo gets to dance with the woman of his dreams as Gareth for his woman to show up. What he didn't know was that his woman had been consumed by a purple magic book that had been sealed in that ruin for a while now. Claire gets possessed by the spirit in the book, but she manages to find time to return to the surface to dance with the man of her dreams. She gets to dance with the man of her dreams for a few seconds before completely turning purple and breaking in front of everyone at the dance. Gareth screams in pain as his stupidity finally becomes clear to him now that he's lost the only person who truly loved him. The following day, everyone gathered in the heavy rain to witness Claire's funeral. As the procession continues, Nemo and the others talk about what the possible cause could be. Shirley shuts them up and recites the funeral prayer for Claire's soul. Meanwhile, Nemo finds Gareth behind a tree trunk and walks up to him hoping to discuss something with him and figure out his true feelings. Gareth, however, tells him not to worry about him. Although he's devastated that the girl died because of his foolishness, he still promises to find her killer and take him down with his own hands. He asks Nemo to tell the president for him as he embarks on his journey to get revenge on Claire's killer. After the funeral, Feria attends a meeting with her superiors to discuss the recent attacks on the volcanic mountain Burgut. Hearing the name brought back memories for her as she asked them why they were concerned about the place. One of the leaders of the academy tells her that a massive underground facility was discovered there recently, and it's believed that the leader of the cult, Amos Germain, also stays there. Furthermore, the leaders show Feria an illustration of the energy flow to the volcanic mountain and tell her that the bastards who call themselves the Physis have been after the silver hourglass in the area. They have to take action before they destroy the silver hourglass or harness its power for themselves. As for how they plan on doing that, the leaders advise Feria to lead a team of all the 7 knights alongside an army of students to take the fight to the volcano and take down Amos and his terrible monsters before it's too late. Also, the leaders tell Feria to be more careful of the double agents living amongst them in the academy. The possession of Gildan, the release of the dragon, and even Claire's death are not ordinary at all, so there should be something she can do about it. Feria promises to form a secret squadron to hunt down those enemies that live within their walls. With that, she ends the meeting and returns outside with her assistant. Ellen tells her to calm her balls and think of the battle with the Physis volcano as a necessity. However, Feria was scared she might not make preparations in time before they wage the war against the Physis. Ellen cooks up a plan to help everyone prepare well for the fight ahead. Later that evening, Gildan shows up to explain the new battle plan with his colleagues. Then they all shift their sights to Nemo, asking him to tell them a thing or two about the mountain, seeing as his former hometown used to be near the place. However, Nemo lies and tells them he can't remember the location. And with that, he leaves for Claire's grave to think about things. Sophia finds him there and engages him in a discussion about the death of a student and Claire in particular. Sophia tells him not to worry too much about things since his hero is helping him. Besides, she feels like his hero will help save them all when the time comes. In the next scene, Eunomia appears to her successor, Feria, and gives her an important mission to reveal the truth about the old library once the war is over. Gareth, however, spends his time in the library checking ancient texts to figure out what happened to his love, Claire. Eunomia died of the same curse after defeating Genius in the old library. Gareth figures Claire must have died by the same curse, and he was super pissed at that for happening. The next morning, Nemo visits Feria singing a very familiar song and asks her about it. Feria tells him her hero used to sing it, and it kind of rubbed in on her eventually. Nemo nods in agreement and continues talking about Feria's wishes for everyone. Feria is a little hesitant about the path she's chosen to follow. Her father always wanted her to be her hero's successor, and that's what's been in her head so far. Nemo, however, tells her to calm down and look at the good she's done so far. Feria realizes that she's also trying her best to keep everyone, and she thanks Nemo for helping her see that. Up next, Feria leads an entire army from the Grand Seed Academy to the volcano to fight the Physis monsters. On getting there, Joe and Gildan split their battalion in two and coordinate ground attacks to keep the small fray at bay, while Feria and the others infiltrate the volcano from above. Their plan works, and Feria manages to gain access to the building alongside Nemo, Shirley, and Ellen. Shirley takes care of a few of the small fry there, and Feria tells Ellen to stay behind and watch their back. With that plan, Feria and her people manage to get themselves to the inner chambers of the enemy base. There, they find an experimental lab with crooked pods scattered all around the place. The pods are suspected to house the artificial humans created by Amos and his people. They walk carefully through the entire room until they see one of the broken pods. Before they could wrap their heads around things, 3 villains who also had heroes showed up to make their fight much harder for them. The leader of the pack of 3, Rita, introduces herself as the successor of the great Empress, Irene, and lets Feria and the others know that they all have heroes of their own. Without further ado, Rita and her other 2 colleagues, Castors and Volux, split Nemo and his girls to take each of them one-on-one. Volux takes on Shirley, Castors takes on Nemo, and Rita takes on Feria. In the meantime, Joe and the others continue their fight outside the volcanic mountain as they slash, slice, and spice up their enemies. Feria loses the fight against Rita, but then refuses to give up. Nemo realizes that Feria is in danger, so he stops his fight with Castors and asks him if he values the lives of his teammates, just as he values his own. Castors gives him the answer he's looking for, and Nemo uses that to create a dust screen so he can leave the spot and get to Feria's. On getting there, he finds Rita as she's about to take Feria down and stops her. Together, Nemo and Feria work towards taking Rita down with their powers and weapons. Sadly, Rita proved to be too strong for them, so she was able to stop them before Castors arrived. Castors calls Rita a weakness and nearly kills her and Nemo together. However, Nemo saves Rita and tells Castors to get off his high horse and protect his partner. While that happens, the leader of the cult, Amos, watches over his people from his seat and prays to his goddess Nestra to help reveal the true son of destruction now that the time for destruction has come. In the meantime, Feria and the others keep on fighting each other with Castors, and her people getting much stronger than before. Gareth finally musters enough courage to get to the basement of the library where Claire was killed. He opens a few doors and finds himself in a room with a Physis altar there. Before he could do any investigation, Physis monsters appeared from all around him to attack him. Up next, Rita, Castors, and Volux all activate their possession powers, but rather than lose control the way Gildan did, they retain control over their possessive state, when Feria asked them how they could do that. The Sons of Destruction proudly told Feria that it was because they kept their heroes bound and in chains. As such, they were able to exploit their explosive powers. Volux goes first and shoots destructive energy balls at the lot. On the other side of the continent, Gareth holds his ground against the Physis monsters that appear to attack him. Joe and Gildan's party sense the Physis monsters growing stronger with each passing minute. Amos, on the other hand, continues harvesting the power of the silver hourglass to use in the awakening of the true son of destruction. Nemo and the others continue getting the life beaten out of them by the idiots who don't trust their heroes. After doing a number on Nemo and his people, Volux and Castors become blinded by their pride as they stop the fight to boast about their strength. Even worse, they make Rita sit the fight out, telling her to watch them take down the weaklings that call themselves the 7 Knights. Nemo outsmarts them and manages to return some damage on Volux, who gets super pissed at his defeat. Without thinking, Volux conjures a giant ball of energy and shoots little energy balls at everyone in the space, including his teammate, Castors. Nemo figures something out in his fight against them and decides to use that against them. As for the ones outside, Joe and his partner, Gildan, keep defeating every Physis monster as they come. Volux swallows his pride and begs Rita to do something about Nemo and his people. However, something really weird happens as the heroes in their bodies begin to rebel against them. Seeing as the heroes were kept chained, they defied their hosts and began to tear them apart. While Volux and her Castors writhe in pain, Rita keeps questioning her existence. Amos has always taught them to use their heroes rather than trust them so they can be stronger and fulfill the true potential of their heroes. Sadly, that was the lie of the century, and even Amos knew that. Nemo moves closer to Rita and tells her not to give in to that horrible teaching as he's a testimony on his own. Moments before he explodes, Castors tells Rita not to listen to what Nemo is saying. Clearly knowing that it's his time to die, he moves closer to Feria and Shirley, hoping to take them with him when he explodes. Shirley, however, would rather die than let that happen, so she makes sure he explodes and dies alone. Before he died, Castors noticed Shirley's fangs and called her out as a vampire. Faria heard him and asked Shirley to explain herself, but then Shirley smiled and told her to keep fighting first. After seeing his partner die, Volux got very scared and ran away, leaving Rita with his enemies. Shirley asks Rita to make her decision now or never, but then Rita keeps quiet as she begins to think about what Nemo said to her. In the meantime, Sophia rushes into the basement library where Gareth is trapped and helps him take down some of the monsters keeping him there. As for Rita, Nemo asks his partners to pursue Amos and leave him to deal with Rita. When Faria asks to make sure he's fine, Nemo tells her to trust him to get it done. With that, Faria and Shirley leave him with Rita as they head towards Amos's chambers. Moments after they leave, Nemo blows his cover and reveals his true self to Rita. Nemo used to be an artificial human that was created by Amos, just like Rita and the others. However, he made his decision to be good and went with it. Rita didn't believe the bullcrap he was saying, so she took the fight to him. Faria and Shirley, on the other hand, run as fast as they can to Amos' room so they can catch him red-handed and defeat him before it's too late. Nemo and Rita fight each other like Tom and Jerry. At one point, they both stop and Nemo tells Rita to quit being so adamant and just accept her hero as she is. Even still, Rita wasn't ready to abandon all her values and her life to believe in an idea she was never comfortable with. Nemo ends up beating her and pinning her to the ground. He charges at her with his chain knife to take her out, and Rita gives up. Just as things are about to end for her, her hero speaks up and urges her to accept her powers so that she can fight and be victorious in the end. Rita suddenly gets a burst of energy and emits a yellow aura that pushes Nemo out of the way. She then begins to question why she was even born in the first place, and Nemo tells her to follow him to Amos' quarters so she can find that out by herself. Rita compliments Nemo and calls him a kind person, but Nemo knows he's far worse than that. He's a terrible liar. Later on, Volux finally arrives at his master's throne. He begs Amos to save him from dying like his friend did, but then Amos tells him he's just disappointed in them. Initially, he thought the Son of Destruction would be amongst the three of them, but now that the true Son has arrived, he has nothing but contempt for Volux and his teammates. After saying all that, he uses the power of the hourglass to kill Volux while he waits for the arrival of the true Son of Destruction. A few minutes later, Faria and Shirley finally get to his chambers and confront him in a fight. However, Amos tells them to be happy as they'd be sacrificed to their high goddess Nestra. After fighting off the Physis in the library basement, Gareth and Sophia check a big book for the truth about Nemo. From the looks of things, they suspect that Nemo might be the true Son of Destruction. Gareth is disappointed that he would let his guard down so much that he got fooled by a dude who pretends to be kind. Faria asks Amos why he turned bad when he was supposedly a well-respected man in his former empire. Amos tells him he got tired of the corruption and wanted to cleanse the world of the rotten people destroying it. He begins his fight against Shirley and Faria, making sure to keep them alive long enough so they can witness the true Son of Destruction. Shirley lands a wound on Amos, but soon finds out that the scumbag is using the power of the silver hourglass to keep himself alive. He does this by rewinding time to reverse the effects of the wounds Shirley inflicted on him. Before continuing the main story, a flashback sheds some light on Ellen's time-controlling powers. When she was younger, Ellen had the power to see the future as her hero. One day, she refused to be friends with a girl because she saw the girl's future and found out that she was going to die in an accident soon. Her nanny at the time told her not to do such things to people. However, Ellen was right, and the girl did die of an accident not too long. Ellen has always been granted her special ability by her hero, Vanessa, who controls time. For her, each passing day was like a script that was being played out. Ellen made sure to use her skill to check the world's future, and also the day it all ends, aka the date after which she stops to see the future. So far, she's been living her life in solace, avoiding everyone she comes across so she doesn't end up freaking them out. One day, she met Faria for the first time, and she could tell that she had a big part to play in thwarting the terrible future she saw back then. Ellen became friends with an awesome person named Faria, who even went to the same school as her. Meanwhile, Ellen secretly amasses power within herself to prepare for the final days of the Earth. One night, she talks to her hero who warned her about using her powers without supervision. Ellen was ready to do whatever it took to go with the flow and play her part in making a better future for her people. As such, she wasn't scared of sacrificing herself for that cause. Back to the main story, Shirley and Faria hold their ground against the powerful Amos. Nemo arrives shortly and saves Faria from certain death. Amos stares at Nemo and realizes that he's the person he's been looking for all this while. He's the Son of Destruction. Outside the temple, Joe and Gildan managed to defeat every physis monster around the ritual site they were using to steal the power of the hourglass and overtake the site. When the coast is clear, Gildan places a small hourglass structure on the altar and leaves things to the others inside. Joe, however, gets a little confused over why they were kept in the dark about the entire plan, and sometimes he feels Ellen knows a bit too much about what's going to happen next, which he finds weird. Gildan, after listening to his friend's worries, tells him not to worry about the big picture as long as they play their part. Inside the temple, Rita has a mental breakdown when she finds out that Amos used her and her colleagues as pawns in his master plan to discover the Son of Destruction. After arguing some facts with him, she spots Volex's body somewhere near Amos and checks to confirm if he took him down. When Amos says yes, she takes the attack on him and turns her rage into power to fight the invincible Amos. At one point in the fight, she manages to cut one of his arms, but Amos regenerates his arm and knocks Rita out. Then he faces Nemo, the true son of destruction, and tells him to give up on trying to take him down. Instead, he should work on accepting his destiny and sacrificing himself to revive the true god of destruction, Nestra. The dimwit also calls himself the true hero and goes on to speak about his blind values and absurd qualities. As the man speaks out his jargon, something he said about a curse catches Nemo's eye, and he wonders what he truly meant by curse. In another scene, Gareth finds out the real truth about the curse from Sophitia, who is suffering from the same effects Claire suffered from moments before she died. From what she could point out, anyone can contract the curse just by knowing about it. Gareth was very concerned for his teacher Sophitia as he connected the dots about Claire's death. Still, he's willing to risk getting the curse just to know more about the man who created it, Genius. In the meantime, Amos keeps beating down Nemo and his partners one by one. After knocking all of them out, he controls Nemo with his purple hands and strikes him with purple lightning to force his innate powers out. Furia couldn't do anything but shout and scream at the top of her voice as she watched her man get torn apart piece by piece. Just then, Ellen shows up and stops Amos from doing more harm to Nemo. He talks down to her and undermines her ability to beat him. Ellen only smiles and asks her captain to leave things in her hand. Then she faces her enemy and tells him about his ritual site and how she will stop his absurd regenerative abilities. Fariad gives her the go-ahead, and Ellen stops time for a bit with the magic she's been amassing for years to come. With that power, she accesses the hourglass structure on the ritual site and channels it to the temple, using it to stop time. Amos tries to stop her before she completes her spell, but it is already too late as Ellen is well prepared for this. She sends Amos' attacks back to him, and breaks the time dust and the ring Amos wore on his hands to give him power. Now that he can't regenerate anymore, she resumes time and feints to allow her people to take over from there. Shirley stays with her as Feria and Nemo take the fight to the clueless bastard. Despite not having the power to regenerate, Amos still put up a very good fight against them. Nemo tries to use his Legis Breaker, but Amos quickly sees through his powers and sends a purple energy spear to take him out. Thankfully, Rita stopped the attack before it could get to Nemo, buying him enough time to amplify his attack and destroy Amos Germain, the leader of the Physis army, with a large beam of Legis Breaker energy that extends to the sky. With Amos out of the way, the Physis monsters all collapse from the lack of their life source, and Sophitia sees the beam in the sky from the old library. Oddly enough, she gives off a very eerie smile and walks back into the room where the book was kept. Getting there, she releases the seal of the cursed book and continues doing unknown things. Moments after taking down his arch-nemesis, Nemo and Feria all take some time off to absorb their victory. Just then, the whole temple starts shaking as it's on the brink of collapse. Rather than follow the 7 knights to their academy, Rita chooses not to get captured by them. Before escaping and going her way, she tells Nemo to be ready for whatever comes his way now that he's been exposed as the Son of Destruction. Feria and the others ignore Rita and finally make it out of the temple alive. With their mission now a complete success, Feria and the other students get to go home to have a nice rest. Meanwhile, Amos somehow revives himself using the spare time dust he managed to keep for himself. However, he finds himself ridden over by the curse and wonders why that is happening to him. Just then, an unidentified woman who looks just like Sophitia appears to him surrounded by a purple aura and breaks the bad news to the man. His life was a lie, and he's been the pawn ever since. As it turns out, Amos was deceived by this mysterious woman all along, and he was used to expose the Son of Destruction, who later turned out to be Nemo. Amos couldn't believe his ears as the curse spread towards every part of his body. In the end, he realizes that unlike Volux and Castors, he is the biggest fool to ever live. The mystery woman watches Amos' body turn to dust and recounts her plan to destroy the world, not knowing that Rita was there, listening to everything she had to say to Amos and herself. So, in a nutshell, the mystery Successor woman snitched on herself. As they return to the school premises, Gildan, Joe, Faria, Nemo, Shirley, and Ellen are all surrounded by soldiers led by Gareth. Gareth accuses Nemo of causing the bad things happening in the academy, and then exposes his to be an artificial being that was created by Amos and his people. Ellen, who seems to have seen this coming, sighs and opens the stage for another dramatic event to play out. Nemo gets arrested and taken to prison to await his trial. About a day later, Faria and Ellen pay Nemo a visit to the prison to talk about his connection with Genius and the Son of Destruction. From what she could point out, Nemo is the same person who formed the contract with Genius and activated the curse in the old library. Not only that, Gareth, who was hiding and hearing their conversation earlier, inches closer to Nemo's cell and accuses him of bringing calamity to their school. At their next meeting, Gareth and the others discuss Nemo and what his trial would look like. Gareth presents some of the research done by Successor that somehow ties Nemo in connection to everything bad that's been happening lately. What's even worse is the fact that the curse of the old library was activated upon his arrival, so that's something worth pointing out as well. Gildan was the only person who didn't jump to conclusions and blame Nemo for their bad luck. To him, there's someone behind the scenes framing this guy, and that's the person they have to be scared of. Gareth gets sad and tells everyone that he just wants to know the truth. Faria and the others paint Nemo to be a bad person, leaving only Gildan to follow his instinct and prove Nemo's innocence. After the meeting, Gareth walks to Nemo's cell and tells him not to try anything funny so he doesn't end up getting killed on the spot. He also tells him about the preventive measures they put in place to keep someone like him in check. Nemo smiles and tells him he has no intentions of using his succession. Gareth gets pissed and exposes Nemo's corrupt arm. Nemo tells him his arm reminds him of the terrible person he used to be. At the time, Faria was already coming down to visit him, but then she stopped midway and hid herself to listen in on their conversation. Nemo tells Gareth his origin story as an artificial being produced en masse alongside his brothers and sisters in that base. Back then, Amos made sure to kill every being that was a failure and continue his experiment like nothing mattered. Nemo's true self woke up before the others and witnessed the wickedness Amos portrayed in front of everyone. At that point, he was scared of death and didn't want to die like some failed experiment. One day, his breakthrough came when his hero spoke to him for the first time. Nemo used the help his hero granted him to escape that facility and become the Nemo they all know. Gareth throws a fit as he doesn't believe the story Nemo is telling him. Nemo, however, refuses to argue with him and instead asks Gareth to kill him. Gareth unsheathes his sword to do the dastardly act, but then he calms himself and waits till his trial. As for the others, Shirley is seen resting with her blood bag. Ellen, who warned her to stop trying to change things so that she doesn't get suspected and discovered. She then removes her shirt and encourages Shirley to suck some of her blood for the night. Gildan, on the other hand, finds Joe waiting for him outside his room. Joe listens to Gildan's woes and asks for a moment to see him out on the tower's balcony. There they discuss Nemo and the good deeds he's done in the past. While Joe is disturbed by Nemo's arm and the things he's done in the past, Gildan is convinced that Nemo's a good guy. Joe, however, tells Gildan that he can't shake off the feeling of Nemo's lie. Up next, Faria summons her hero, Eunomia, and asks her to tell her what happened in the library. Eunomia shows her the crystal curse on her arm, and Faria asks if she got attacked by Genius. Eunomia tells her to be wary of digging too deep into the truth, as she might get affected by the curse as well. However, Faria was willing to risk it all for Nemo, as she couldn't bear to see him executed. Eunomia checks to make sure she knows what she's saying, and when Faria tells her she's serious, she decides to take her somewhere within the old library to reveal the entire truth to her. Getting there, Eunomia unlocks the door to the room where the cursed book rests, and Faria walks in, only to get engulfed by the book's power. In the next scene, Gildan meets with one of the jurors judging Nemo's trial and blackmails him into doing whatever it takes to make sure Nemo gets exonerated. After he meets with the fat man, Gildan heads outside and finds Shirley waiting there for him. To his surprise, Shirley offers her undying support to him and lets him know that she's on Nemo's side. As for Joe, the musclehead is seen training his swings in his secret spot in the forest. Successor, the suspicious snake, approaches him and gives him her listening ears. Joe tells her he doesn't know what to do yet, but Sufficia tells him not to worry too much about himself, as she believes that he will save them all. With that, she proceeds to kiss Joe for the first time, and the fool doesn't realize that something is not right. Bro is so deep in love with her that he sucked them lips like a bad boy. Nemo, on the other hand, struggles to understand his existence as he can't tell what he is anymore. Faria revisits Nemo's ruined village and traces the house where Nemo was born. She enters the dilapidated structure and finds a family photo of Nemo and his parents, and notices Nemo wearing a weird red pendant. She leaves the house and finds the pendant lying on the floor. Confused, she wonders what the pendant is doing there, and as she bends to pick it up, Rita shows up and accuses Faria of following her. Faria tries to explain things to her, but Rita doesn't care to find out what is up. Rather, she kept on attacking Faria and forced her hand. In the end, Faria defeats her and tells her to surrender to the 7 knights. Rita refuses to do that as she gets up and accesses the power of her goddess Irene. Even with the immense power she got from Irene, Faria was still able to hold her ground against her fire-themed attacks. In the meantime, Sufficia and the others all gather around for Nemo's trial. After all's been said and done, they all find Nemo guilty. Just as they're about to mete out his punishment, Shirley and Gildan arrive with an imperial order to delay the execution. Even with that proof, Sufficia still orders Nemo to be executed. Joe and Gareth face Shirley and Gildan to take Nemo out, but then Faria arrives in style and gives Nemo the pendant of the real Nemo. She makes him confess to killing the real Nemo and taking over his form to infiltrate the school. Nemo admits to being the real Nemo's killer, and he bows his head to accept his death as he begs Faria to end him. To his surprise, however, Faria wasn't there to kill him. Instead, she was there to face the real enemy, Sufficia. Joe and Gareth were fools for the real enemy at the time, so they activated their successor's power to fight the president, Gildan, and the others. Thankfully, Faria was able to get her ship there in time so she could avoid fighting her comrades. Joe tries to take down the ship, but then Rita, who was piloting the ship at the moment, slaps him away. Faria manages to get Nemo on her ship in time and escape before Sufficia kills him for real. Moments after rescuing poor Nemo from certain death, Rita and Faria tell him the truth about Miss Sufficia. Nemo cannot believe Rita would even think about helping them out, much less tell him the truth about Sufficia. Sadly, she was correct as Faria tells him everything. Apparently, Sufficia knew about everything that's been happening so far and was working behind the scenes to make Nemo use genius powers. As for how the seal got triggered, Faria tells Nemo that it must have been the Legis breaker he used in the Burgot Mountains. As they discuss, something shakes the ship, and they all look back to see the familiar purple hue from the magical vortex coming from the cursed book. Those on the ground also notice the vortex appearing and run the risk of the Earth getting destroyed by the vortex. If their calculations are correct, the entire planet would be absorbed in the vortex in the next 60 hours. Rather than find who's responsible for this, Gareth spends his time powering up to find and kill Nemo, as he believes he's the reason behind the vortex. In the meantime, Shirley, Joe, and Gildan all think about their next move. While Gildan and Shirley are more inclined towards learning the truth, the musclehead just wants to kill Nemo. Also, Gareth gets to Sufficia's office to get some more dark powers so he can be strong enough to beat Nemo. Nemo, on the other hand, gets served some tea by his lover Faria. Nemo keeps on regretting why he did what he did back then, but Faria, who was already head over heels in love with him, tells him not to think like that. Instead, he should think about people like her, whose lives he changed just by being himself. As of now, Nemo's past actions aren't what they should be concerned about, as Faria believes Nemo is the key to her being free from her lifelong mission of becoming a hero. There, both of them have their moment and confess their love to each other. Then, Faria makes the hardest decision and decides to return to Grand Seed Academy to end things with Sufficia. Lucky for her, Nemo shares the same sentiment. In the meantime, Sufficia performs all types of dangerous and powerful experiments on Gareth, just to give him enough power to help her take down Nemo and his people. Ellen is seen gathering every last bit of her power to control time. Her hero Vanessa asks her if she's sure about risking her life to help her people, and Ellen tells her it's worth it, especially if it means she gets to see that future beyond where it all ends. And so the stage is set. Nemo, Rita, and Faria all get back to the academy and land in the forest, where they find Joe together with Shirley and Gildan, all of whom are ready to stop them. Rita holds him off and buys some time for Nemo and Faria to get to Sufficia and stop whatever she's planning. As Rita fights her former colleagues, Faria and her man go to the old library to search for Sufficia. Rita tells Shirley and the others about the real traitor in their midst, Sophia. While Shirley and Gilden agree with her, Joe refuses to do so and accidentally activates the power Sophia planted in him. Gilden stays behind to save his friend and urges the others to get a move on and help Feria and her boyfriend. Upon getting to the room where the Book of Time is being kept, Eunonia morphs out of Feria and explains things to the youngsters. Incidentally, Genius pops out of Nemo as his hero and stands beside Eunonia. Together, they reveal the truth to both youngsters. Eunonia tells them that the curse behind the Book of Time is a fable, and they just wanted to keep people away from the book so that they don't get affected by its imperfections. In a flashback, Genius and Eunonia are seen facing a group of monsters after someone accidentally releases the Book of Time. Back then, Genius's Legisbreaker was the only power that could seal the Book of Time, so he made Eunonia sing that song Feria used to sing, just so that he could seal the book easily. With that, he fuses his soul with the book and binds himself with it forever. Now that Sophia is about to undo the seal, Feria gets a little concerned and asks him why Sophia knew so much about the Book of Time if the whole thing was supposed to be a secret. Perhaps someone was there at the time the seal was happening. Before Genius could say anything, Sophia showed up and told them that she was there at the time. Sophia was obsessed with Genius back then, who was in love with Eunonia, and she was jealous about it. Feria asks her how she's still alive after hundreds of years, and Sophia tells her that she kept coming back to save the world. A long time ago, she thought of using the vortex to destroy the world and create another one. However, Genius and Eunonia never understood, and they even ostracized her. Nemo tells her he isn't going to let her destroy the world, and even goes to attack her. However, Sophia blocks his attacks and continues her story. Genius killed her the day after he realized that she was working for Physis. Somehow, Sophia managed to transfer her consciousness into different bodies over the years, just so she could take her revenge on Genius for betraying her love for him one day. Feria asks her why she's so bent on killing Nemo, and Sophia tells him it's because he's the only person who can destroy the Book of Time. Gareth shows up a little while later and cuts off Nemo's hands. After getting his hands on Nemo, Sophia stabs him in the back and calls him stupid for believing such bullcrap about her being the good guy. With him and Nemo out of the way, there's nobody to stop her grand plan of destroying the world with the Book of Time. Just when Sophia thinks everything is all over, Ellen shows up and reverses the wound on Nemo's hand. Nemo, on the other hand, gets into a trance and finds himself facing the real Nemo he killed before taking over his body. The other Nemo was pretty chill and told him to live so he could fight for the ones who loved him. He helps the fake Nemo recall why he's alive now and pushes him back to the real world via his hero. Nemo gets back to normal as Ellen restores every part of his body. Ellen tells him to remember the reason why he has to live, and when he does, Nemo finally acquires his succession card to fight with Genius by his side this time. After helping Nemo get his arm and powers back, Ellen collapses to the ground and gets picked up by Feria. Ellen tells Feria that Nemo dying would mean the end of their world as she knows it. Seeing as she couldn't let that happen, she managed to rewind time to the moment Nemo nearly lost his hand. Nemo gets his shit together and confronts Sophia in a fight. Sophia, on the other hand, absorbs the Book of Time and expands into a monster with a portal on her belly. Now that she's a hideous monster, Sophia believes she can end Nemo and the pesky 7 Guardians, so she can achieve her lifelong aim to destroy the world. In the next scene, Gilden wakes his friend up and tells him not to get tired yet, as the worst is yet to come. With that, Sophia expands further to become a giant right in front of everybody. She makes stupid comments about how small the world is, but I think we all know that jealousy got the best of her. Without further ado, she warps everyone on the ground into space-time destruction portals and creates Physis monsters to kill people and propagate themselves. Thankfully, Feria and the others were able to show up on time to cull the Physis monsters being created. Nemo gets another meeting with his hero Genius, who tells him to destroy Sophia as quickly as possible before she gets completely absorbed in the time vortex. Rita, Joe, and Gilden also show up to offer their support to Nemo. Nemo takes a moment to greet and welcome everyone back on the battlefield. Then he leaves for the leader of the bunch, Sophia. In the meantime, Shirley spends some time with her lover, Ellen, after realizing that she is going to die. She asked Ellen to try to live with her, but then Ellen wanted to die. Shirley begs her to stay with her for eternity, just as she can't live without her one true love, Ellen. Somehow, she convinces Ellen to drink her blood and turn into a vampire so she can keep living. Faria, on the other hand, arrives at the main body with Nemo. With a dangerous purple wall being put in to protect the main body, Faria gets ready to use all the power that she has left and even risks accelerating the effects of the curse just to bring down that wall so that Nemo can enter the wall. Just as she's about to do it, Gareth shows up and uses every last bit of strength in his body to forge a hole in the purple wall. With his body turning purple from the crystal attacks, Gareth turns every bit of his anger into power and atones for his sins by opening a hole in the wall for his people to get on. Faria and Nemo finally get to Sufficia's sub-body and take her through a talk about morals and values. They try to convince her not to control the world, but also struggle to save it. Sufficia, however, lets them know that controlling the world isn't her aim either. Since there's no true path to happiness for her, like no true love for her, she can only try to destroy everyone like the selfish brat that she is. Nemo and Faria tell her to shut her trap and listen to reason. Their heroes and the other heroes resonate in one voice to make Sufficia know that the flames of the heart can never be extinguished as long as they are together. Sufficia gets very pissed off at genius Nemo for not accepting her wishes this time. She gets attacked by Nemo and Faria a few times before sealing and encasing herself back into her bigger body. Nemo and Faria work together to take down the giant called Sufficia. At one point in their fight, Nemo and Faria combine their powers, the Legis Breaker and Faria's lightning powers against Sufficia's Dithray, and this manages to light up the entire battlefield with everyone watching the marvelous display of wit and strength. In the end, Nemo and Faria finally manage to cut Sufficia off her giant body. Faria loses the ability to use her succession for a short period, but Nemo is still able to stand tall. Sufficia, on the other hand, still had her vortex on her belly. She makes a dramatic display in front of everyone to prove to them that she still has plans to take down the enemy. Nemo abandons all his self-pride and transforms into his true artificial form. He makes sure to mend things with Faria before rushing into the fight. Rita, who was spectating the fight from another end, gets a little shocked to see an artificial being bond with a hero like it was nothing. Nemo takes the fight to Sufficia and lets her know that he is going to do anything he can do to live, as he won't ever want to disrespect the memory of the real Nemo by dying. In their final fight, Sufficia stabs Nemo in the chest, but then Nemo strangles her neck. He gives his hero ample time to spend with his crush, Sufficia. Sufficia begs Genius to recognize her as his lover and promises to return things to the way they are. However, Genius wasn't ready to trust a crazy woman like that, so G sacrifices himself and reseals the Book of Time with Sufficia inside. Nemo and his people finally get victorious in their battle. With time, everyone slowly got back to their normal state, with Ellen and Shirley being lovers forever, now that they're the same kind. As for Joe, he keeps training to protect everyone in his stad, not knowing that he already had a crush spying on him. Gareth somehow survives the fight and gets teased by his friends for crying his heart out and apologizing to them. As for Faria and Nemo, they go on a journey to search for ways to eliminate the Book of Time and prevent it from getting into the wrong hands forever. Nemo has lost his succession powers now, but Faria wasn't, at the very least, concerned about that as long as she gets to spend eternity with her new man. Nemo also feels the same, and he acknowledges her love for him as they embark on this very important journey together. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.